pollinator pathways of Cape Cod. So I am going to give him the mic right now. Thank you. Okay.
Excited to be here. This is a great event. It's what's the name of the farm?
Valley Farm Community Garden.
Valley Farm Community Garden, which is a great organization that's sponsoring this, and Pam got it delivered a beautiful day for it. So thank you. So I'm Gary Bowden. I am from Orleans, so I live on the Cape, just way up at the other end of the Cape at this point in time. And I am a master gardener as well, which is a program through Barnstable County Extension, which is all about education of the homeowner about home gardening and helping gardens grow. So a number of us here have been involved with the Master Gardener program. And I'm here today to talk about the Pollinator Pathway Cape Cod, which is another program we started in the last couple of years. So but it's more about the pathway is also just to talk about the principles and the concepts behind what the pathway is all about and why it's relevant today to what we're doing. So this is our logo, and I'll come back to that in a few minutes. So maybe we can play a little game here. So I'm asking people to name what you believe to be pollinators. Hopefully we all know. But I've got a few pictures of some. What do we think this guy is?
Pollinator.
It's the pollinator. It's one of our native bumblebees. Do we all know that are honeybees native? Honeybees are European honeybees. Honeybees are imported and brought to this country to help with our farming and agricultural movement. They're great bees. They provide honey. They do lots of wonderful things, but they're not native bees. So we need our native bees for particular purposes. They're native bees, particularly on the Cape. They pollinate a lot of our vegetables and fruits here on the Cape. So we have lots of native bees. What do we think this guy is, of course? The monarch. So there are hundreds of varieties of native butterflies, and there's a symbiotic relationship between butterflies and particular plants, which is why what we're talking about today has so much relevance. And what do we have down here? It's a fly. Yeah. So flies. There are thousands of species of flies that are pollinators. If you go out and look at your plants and you look closely, it may at times be hard to tell the difference between a bee and a fly because some of the bees are so small. But flies do a fair amount of just natural pollination. And then, of course, this guy in the middle, probably a big wasp. Yeah. So wasps, large number of wasps we have that are native wasps. There's the big, beautiful golden digger wasps, as well as the yellow jacket wasp that form the nest. Most of these bees and wasps, particularly native bees and wasps, do not sting, or they will not sting, or they will sting only when aggravated and attacked. Like yesterday, when I care so much about bees, how dare a bee bite me? But I was weeding in the thyme, and they were down there, and they were right by the lavender in the thyme, and I grabbed one, and he attacked me. Good for him. But most of our native bees don't sting. And and why is that? Because the honeybees are protecting something. The honeybees are protecting the queen. They're protecting a hive. They have a job to perform. Whereas our native bees, they're really just foraging. That's their life, is to forage. And the females, of course, to go and lay eggs. But most of them are all solitary bees. Many of them are ground nesters. And you aggravate them, you step on them, they're on some clover in the lawn and you step on them, you might get stung if they have a stinger. Then what's this whole collection over here? Those are beetles, and the beetles are sort of the unappreciated. They're the oldest of the pollinators, of course, and there are, the beetle we unfortunately are most familiar with around here is the Japanese beetle, which is an invasive beetle. But if you really look closely, you'll see a lot of large beetles, different sized beetles. They too are sort of happenstance pollinators. But what's not on this list? What else do we have? Birds, did I hear? Hummingbirds. Hummingbirds are the most common bird pollinator, and you'll see them, the two typical native hummingbirds that we have. But really we'll talk a bit about the cycle of life, but we need these insects to support our native birds and our migratory birds. Another bee pollinator. You can think of a pollinator that starts with B that we haven't talked about? Bats. And we don't have a lot of bat pollination going on in the U.S., but in the tropics, there's a fair amount of bat population. Bat pollination, but it's good. It's a bee term, so it's easy to remember. And the last thing that's not on here, a big common type of pollinator we have, the moths. And the moths, a lot of the moths, you'll see daytime moths. You'll see a lot of moths that sort of start to look like butterflies. But we also had a lot of night traffic. So we really think almost the biggest pollinator we have are the moths. And a lot of that pollination happens at night because, of course, the flowers are still open and the pollinators, the moths are out at night. So these are the guys we're protecting. And as I talked about, we do have invasive, we have native, all these that I'm talking about are, of course, native pollinators, but we do have invasive, non-native pollinators like the honeybees we've talked about. But we, well, let me go on here. So what's threatening these pollinators? Because the problem is when you were out and about in your yard, you know, a lot of us, and you're driving, the story you've heard about, I don't see as many insects on my car windshield. And that could have something to do with the shape of our cars and whatnot. But it really has to do with the fact there is scientific proof to show we have many, 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 many fewer insects than we used to have. So a number of studies, and it's not just in North America. We have the monarch population, and our friends from the butterfly organization will tell you, is down 90% in the past 20 years. The migratory process has just really decimated the monarchs. And why is it? Because they don't have food sources. And that's why we're all working to change our food sources to support the monarchs. But it's all types of insects. So 28% of the North American bumblebees are threatened in some level. Here in Massachusetts, we have 400 varieties of bumblebees. We really see about a dozen of them because we just don't have the plant and material life to support them. There are 4,000 bees in North America, types of bees, but again, it's dozens, well, probably hundreds of those bees we see on a regular basis. But it's not just in the U.S. Europe's having the same problem. 46% of European bumblebees are in decline, and a large number face extinction. And then Germany has seen a decline. There was a great article in the Times a couple years ago, New York Times Magazine, I think really launched people's awareness about the insect apocalypse. And we are, without our insects, we don't have food. You know, without our insects, we don't have butterflies. Without it's a part of the cycle of life. So there is a worldwide threat, documented, proven worldwide threat. But I'm not here to bring you down. I'm here to talk about what we can do about it. But what are our main threats that we're facing? And this really gets to our principles at the Pathway. What are our main threats? What does this look like? Overdevelopment. You know, just development itself is taking away native habitats like this. You know, we're so fortunate on the Cape, if you live here, that we have the beautiful natural landscape. But a lot of us came from this kind of environment. And yes, you can bring bees there and you can bring pollinators there, but it takes a lot of work. But the other thing, these bottom two, this one here, really represents spraying. And what we're really trying to do through the Pathway is to encourage people to think before they take action with chemicals in their lawn. I'm here to tell you, the sprays are one of the biggest killers of insects that we have. I mean, they're a pesticide for a reason. You know, you may be having a wedding, or you may be having an event, or you may be having your grandchildren, and you don't like, you don't want there to be insects. Well, you can spray. You can hire Mosquito Joe and Mosquito Mary and whoever. But the fact is, it's killing whatever that spray comes in contact with. And that may be your intent for that day. But I ask you to think about whether there's not other controls you can use. Those sprays, they may work for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. But the factor is, if your neighbor has standing water and mosquito larvae in a matter of hours, those mosquitoes are going to breed and be in your yard. It's just illogical. People think, oh, I can use a organic control. Same thing. It'll kill what it comes in contact with, but it doesn't have lasting effect. So do some research if you're really thinking about this, and think twice about hiring the spray companies, because this concept is relatively, you think back, it coincides with the decline in all of our insects, is because we just instinctively are starting protecting ourselves. Protect yourself, spray your clothes. You don't need to spray the environment around you. But also the growth in lawns. There's some great statistics about the fact that the lawns used to be the lawns of the rich. They had acres and acres of ground. They wanted big green grasses. But what happened in right after World War II is common Americans found it. The sales of lawnmowers went from like 20, 30,000 lawnmowers sold before the war to hundreds of thousands of lawnmowers sold post-war, because the Americans found the beauty of lawn and landscape. And the lawn is a total monoculture of no value to pollinators. So, we see, combining my two topics of development and lawn, we see on the Cape, people come from Connecticut, no offense to anybody from Connecticut, or Jersey, or wherever they come from, and they have a beautiful new home they've built, and they have 2 acres they've cleared of every oak tree and every cherry tree and every native tree they had, because maybe they want a pool in the back. And so then they put in a grassy green lawn, and then chemically treat it. They have just created a pollinator zero zone. There's just no value to that. So these are the threats that we're dealing with, and why you're probably here and care is to take some action. But the other thing we're trying to get people to recognize is gardening was thought to be attractive to people, and it still has a lot of beauty in it, but it's a beautiful lawn with a lot of maybe some tropical exotic plants. Maybe it's really aimed to the 1 month of the year you're here, and the grass sort of sets off, and the garden beds become the frame. And what we're trying to get people to think about is, how about reversing that? How about just having the lawn you need? How about just having the lawn for your kids to play that you haven't sprayed with chemicals? The lawn for your little dogs to play in that you have not sprayed with chemicals. Why would you spray chemicals and have your kids play croquet and hang out in the lawn and have your beautiful dogs run around out in the yard and then come in your house? Have the lawn that you need, and perhaps just have a natural Cape Cod lawn, and then think about native plants. We're trying to change people's thought that the native plants, these are echinacea all here along this building. They provide beautiful monarch pollinator support now, and the seed heads on all of those echinacea will provide birds food all throughout the fall. So it's supporting this life cycle, and we just need to sort of change our mindset that this can be beautiful, that these native plants, goldenrod, a lot of people thought goldenrod was just a weed, a roadside weed. There are multiple versions of goldenrod, and they provide our summer, late summer, early fall color. Those beautiful yellow goldenrods that are just now starting to come into bloom are a great They're support for the bees and the pollinators, and they're beauty in your yard. They extend your season. Asters will come after that, the beautiful purple asters. So we just want people to change how they're thinking about their lawn. And the concept of a pathway is to do this, is to say, look, we can have your pretty yard, and a mile down the road, your pretty yard that's filled with pollinators, but the pollinators need to move between those. And the pollinators don't travel very far. Sure, the monarchs travel many, many, many thousands of miles, but a lot of the small flies, a lot of the small bees, a lot of the small insects we have that we want to support with certain native plants, they're 500 feet, 1,000 feet maybe. So we're trying to create a corridor of people who care like you do that will plant and create a habitat so the pollinators can move yard to yard to yard. Now again, the Cape, we're so fortunate. We have the largest host keystone plant for pollinators is the oak tree, and we have so many oak trees here, but also so are the cherries and the birch and a number of others. But you think of a more urban habitat, you need to create linking landscapes. So that's what the concept is with the pathways. We're trying to get people to dedicate themselves to our principles, and with their neighbors, with their homeowner association, with the Land Conservation Trust, and create a continuous corridor of native plants that provides nutrition and habitat, and for insects and birds to help our migratory birds as well as our native birds, our residential year-round birds, and even the smallest green spaces. I talk to people a lot about, you can have pots on your patio and contribute to this. If you put a pollinator plant in a pot on your yard, it could be a small butterfly weed, it could be echinacea, it could be anise hyssop, which is blooming right now. You will be surprised at the bees that you'll attract, and you won't even realize there could be no bees around you, and you'll find them. Those bees will find those plants. So our principles are pretty simple, and what we're trying to encourage people to do is plant native plants, as I've just talked about, and I've got a great list back at my booth is back here. These are native plants that are particularly well suited to Cape Cod. We encourage people to think about northeast natives, which are particularly suited to our region. But these are plants that are maybe not all native here. We have a pretty small native range here on the Cape, but these will do well here. But we also encourage you, not to plant western natives or Midwest natives, but to think about northeast natives. And then remove invasive plants. I also have a brochure at the table. This is done by master gardeners. And on our Cape, what do we think two of our biggest offenders are on the Cape of invasives? Bittersweet, which is on the cover here. The beautiful, not so beautiful, I can't even look at it, orange berries that people love to make wreaths out of. And I would say English ivy is really taken over. And but unfortunately we're seeing a lot of honeysuckle. There's the yellow and white honeysuckle is bad. It's a bush. It's a little more contained. But garlic mustard comes out early. It spreads very very quickly. And multiflora rose, which a lot of people see, which looks pretty, but it is a it is a terrible plant. And why these plants are bad is first off, they don't provide any source food for our native pollinators. But secondly, they change the soil structure. They block out light. They do not allow the native plants to come up that are naturally there. Native seeds are in our seed bank for up to 100 years. So if they receive light and water, they would grow, if not covered by bittersweet. And we've all seen bittersweet and English ivy bring down trees. I mean, it's terrible what it can do. Have less lawn. I already talked about that. We want you to have less lawn. And then this last concept, we're approaching fall, and it's called leave the leaves. And what we're trying to encourage people to do is to think about not cleaning out their garden beds so actively. Take a break. The fall is beautiful here. Enjoy the fall. Take a hike. Don't pay your landscaper. Just leave that leaf mulch. Get it off your yard if you want to save your grass. Blow it, rake it into your garden beds. If you want to mulch it down, if you have lots of oak leaves, feel free to chop mulch it and put it in there. But leave that understory, because on the Cape, our winters, as you know, are not that bad. And a lot of the insect population will live out their life through the winter, underneath that leaf mulch. But if you blow it all out, there's nothing there. Yes, bees do like bare dirt to dig their tunnels in and lay their eggs, but they're not laying eggs come October, November, December. What you're trying to keep up is the moths and the various small insects that are going to overwinter there. So we say leave the leaves is the common theme. And we also talk about delaying the cleanup, because we really want to wait until it's about 50 degrees somewhat regularly before you really clear all that. But the biggest joke is it also just protects your dirt and your soil. Why pay your landscaper to blow it all out in the fall and then say, now bring me 30 yards of mulch in the summer? Why are we doing that? Leave what you've got naturally there. So I just want you to come by and say hi and talk to me. I'll tell you some more. We formed the pollinator pathway it's about the best thing in my mind that came out of COVID for those of us who did this. It was 9 organizations on the Cape, Land Trust, Garden Club related, and we did it in the Orleans, Harwich, Brewster, Chatham area. We affiliated ourselves with a group out of Connecticut called the Pollinator Pathway .org. They started this a few years ahead of us, and in the 7 or 8 years this has all been going on, there are now chapters from Maine to Florida, all to the west, and it's no longer Pollinator Pathway Northeast. They see themselves as a national organization. They host our website. They provide great education if you go to their site. They helped us set up through their site. We have a map now, and you can see it on our brochure, which is available here or at our table. And there's a little map that shows Cape Cod. And when we started this, we had 5 or 6 people interested who had registered via this website. We now have over 400. We're hoping to have 500 by the end of the summer. So I encourage you to think about showing your support by registering your garden on this website. It's free. We don't sell your name to anybody. We send you probably 6 newsletters a year telling you about events like this. So what we've done is we have an advocacy component. We've advocated. In Orleans, we passed a native plant we passed a pollinator-friendly resolution for the town, but we worked with our Department of Public Works such that all new garden projects they put in around the town include a high percentage of native plants. And most importantly, we just created a relationship where they see the value in doing that, and they work with us. But we've also done education like this. We're working closely with the Association to Preserve Cape Cod. They're very much, these concepts are very much behind what they believe in. Lots of land trust, lots of garden clubs have taken this on, and is a new initiative to educate people about why you want to treat the Cape special. Keep the Cape special is really what I feel about it. We have a lot to value and cherish here. Lastly, part of embracing this concept is sometimes your lawn starts to look a little messy, some people may say. I think it looks beautiful. It looks like that picture I showed you. So there are ways to sort of signal to your friends and neighbors that, I do care. I'm doing this for a purpose. Maybe around the perimeter of your property. Maybe you mow a path through the middle. Maybe you're only mowing your lawn every other week or every third week. One of the things we do is we have a sign that's available. I have a few of them here, but it's also available at Hyannis Country Gardens and a few other places through our website. You can see it. And we're just encouraging people, this is a conversation starter in your neighborhood to explain why you're doing this consciously and why you're trying to help the pollinators. So these are $15 available at my booth. But most importantly, go to our website, check it out, educate yourself, and learn some more. But I'll take any questions, thoughts, feedback, any reaction? Thoughts? Okay. Anyway, I'm around. Come talk to me. Thank you very much.
on Cape Cod. We have a little over 400 members of beekeepers here on Cape Cod alone. I am also, my property is also registered with the pollinator pathway. I'm currently managing 5 hives, also have 5 hives, and have numerous native bee habitats on my property. Chickens and flowers and gardens and fruit trees and a little bit more than I can manage sometimes. I'm also an organic gardener and nature lover. So before I get into the nitty-gritty of this, what I really want to say, some of you might wonder what it's like to be a beekeeper. And I thought about this. I'm like, why do I keep bees? Why am I crazy beekeeper guy? You know, you're dealing with something that could be potentially life-threatening. So I thought about it. It took me a long time. So I thought about, you know, unlike butterflies, you know, bees could be potentially life-threatening. I've never heard of anyone succumbing to too many butterfly kisses. It seems that something magical happens to you when you are managing bees. Now, if you notice, I'm going to say managing bees quite a bit because that's what it is today. It's managing bees. There's a lot of problems with honeybees. We'll get into that a little bit, but they have to be managed today. They pretty much just can't survive on their own anymore. It's just the way it is. So one, you will become an instant weatherman or weather person. Everything, like today is an absolutely gorgeous day to be in your beehive. Honeybees don't like it when it's cloudy, rainy, too windy. When you rip the roof off of their house, they can get a little ornery. So we try to pick a nice, warm, sunny day, preferably between 10 and 2 p.m. Why is that? Anybody know? Why?
Because they're out working.
Exactly. Right. Not everybody's home. I don't have to deal with 40, 50,000 bees in my face. You know, so a lot of the vast majority of the foragers are out gathering pollen and nectar. So that's always a good time. So it's very weather dependent. Also, under 60 degrees is a no-no. You know, they don't like that. Bees fly, I think it's around 50 degrees and above. Anything below 50 degrees, they don't really fly. They're just kind of, yeah, you know, just kind of hang around in the hive, you know. So that's it with the weather. And number 2, you will become a citizen scientist, a botanist, an entomologist, all rolled into one. You literally will become a citizen scientist once you start beekeeping. It's pretty involved. And you literally will become a forever student. You never, ever stop learning. You're always learning something new. Bees can get ahead of you very quickly. So it's like you never got out of school, like you're in college forever when you have bees. And I think, for me personally, you care more about your environment. You feel more connected with nature. After all, environmental changes greatly affect the health and well-being of your colonies. And you have to get used to failure and learning from your mistakes. A lot of things in life are the same way. You make a lot of mistakes. With beekeeping, you make a mistake, it's difficult to correct it. So you get one shot a lot of times. So, but that's how you learn. It's just, that's what it is. You know, you constantly make mistakes because bees are highly intelligent and there's a whole bunch of them in there and they can get way ahead of you. All kinds of little problems can come up. So you have to get used to failure. It's just part of it. And it's mostly a solitary hobby. I don't like the word hobby, but for all purposes we'll call it a hobby. But like I said, it's a solitary hobby. It's not like, you know, I can say, call up my buddy Alex here. Hey Alex, grab some beers. Come on, let's open up some hives. You know, that's not going to happen. You know what I mean? It's peaceful. You're living in the moment. It's an adrenaline rush. You're focused. You're using your mind. You're working your muscles. You're outside. You're sweating. You enjoy watching all the pollinators work together. It's challenging. So all these things together make beekeeping fascinating. A while back, and I don't think it was somebody here, it might have been you. Recently I gave a presentation on bees and I mentioned how sometimes beekeepers will requeen their colonies. Every year to keep a strong, young, viable queen. And a person spoke up and said I was playing God. Is that you? Okay. So maybe I am. I don't know. I explained without a strong, viable queen, the entire colony is doomed to slowly perish. It's part of beekeeping where understanding bee biology and science can help ensure their survival. Educating yourself can help you make those critical decisions. Last year I was part of a research program from URI biology students, undergrad students, where they took samples from bees for research. These young people are our next generation of scientists, can help develop resources to help our native pollinators, and I was grateful to be a small part of it. We're almost there. It's really tough being a bee these days, not just bees, but all our pollinators, bees, butterflies, moths, beetles, wasps, and so on. Major factors include climate change, plants and pollinators out of sync with each other, loss of habitat, pesticides. All these things make it hard to find places to nest. Native plants, some native bees are plant specific. Hotter summers, cooler winters have a major impact on our pollinators. What we can do to help is to continue to plant flowers that bloom now through fall. Being optimistic that if everyone here did that, it would make a difference. So my main thing I wanted to talk about, I thought about this, how am I going to connect butterflies and bees? So it's simple, the connection between bees, butterflies, and people. The connection between bees, butterflies, and people dates back thousands of years. Humans rely on bees and native pollinators, including butterflies, for our vegetable gardens, flowers, global food supply, agricultural feed for cattle and livestock. Pollinators, not just bees, according to Forbes, puts an economic value between $235 to $577 billion annually. That's globally. $577 billion. That's a lot of money. More than $24 billion to the U.S. economy alone. So our relationship with bees and native pollinators has a significant dollar amount attached to it. Bees are probably known as the best pollinator, specifically the honeybee. As a major food crop pollinator, you've probably all heard this 100 times, some 80% of all flowering plants require animal pollination. 1 out of every 3 bites of food can be attributed to pollinators. But the honeybee ranks number 1. To put that in perspective, a honeybee ranks number 1. To put that in perspective, a few examples are 1 million acres of almonds in Central California require 2 million hives of honeybees. Isn't that crazy? 1 million acres require 2 million hives of honeybees. Some 72,000 acres of blueberries require 150,000 hives of bees. Sorry, George, butterflies just can't do that, man. And there's many, many, many more. Apples, strawberries, blueberries, they're all pollinators. And probably one of the most important things is coffee. Coffee needs pollinators. Can you imagine if we didn't have pollinators for our coffee? My God, $7 for a cup of coffee at Starbucks would be $57 for, if it had to be hand pollinated. Butterflies and moths have been used by man for centuries for biological research, including navigation, evolution, genetics, and biodiversity conservation. There are over 4,000 species of native bees in North America. Some 22,000 species worldwide. Imagine that, 22,000 species of bees worldwide. Here in New England, around 400 species have been documented, and the honeybee is not one of them. A honeybee is not a native bee, just so you know. So I want to play a little game. So what did I say? Honeybee is not a native bee. There's over 22,000 species of bees worldwide. Everybody think of a bee in your head. Just quickly think of a bee. Any bee. And I'm going to read your mind.
Bumblebee.
How many people thought of a cellophane bee? Carpenter bee? Yeah, you must have carpenter bee. Leafcutter bee? Mason bee? Digger bee? No? Bumblebee? Yeah, just like I thought. Honeybee? Yeah, so you weren't listening to me. Honeybee is not a native bee. It's okay. So you weren't listening, you weren't paying attention. That's all right, but it's what you know. It's two of the most common bees that we see in our yard and our garden are honeybees and bumblebees. But there are many, 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 many more types of bees in your yard. All right, so I get it, you know. We got cartoons of bees and coloring books and toys, and they're always a honeybee or a bumblebee, so, you know, it's what we know. So anyway, I said the honeybee is not native. The European honeybee is not native to North America. They were brought over here from Europe from English settlers in the mid-16th century for trade of honey and wax. So just think about back in the day, 16th, 17th, 18th century, there was no electricity. Wax was all the rage, man. Got to get your wax, you know. So over the century, honeybees have been domesticated. Today we treat them much more like livestock, and that's absolutely true. They're cared for, they're fed in times of dearth. If you don't know what dearth is, beekeeping has its own language. Dearth is a term used for a lack of pollen or nectar flow. Treated for pests and diseases, given a warm and dry place to live, and bred by the millions to increase their population. Managing bees is not for everyone. Having a hive or two on your property won't solve the problems that bees have. That's not something for everyone. Pollinators are the basis of our entire ecosystem. Without them, the entire system would collapse. Best thing you can do is to simply plant bee flowers and put up a few native bee boxes in your backyard for mason bees and leafcutter bees and other solitary bees. That's how I started. I consider mason bees and leafcutter bees as my gateway bee. Kind of got me going on. I'm like, what's the next step up from that is honeybees. So, and by the way, yeah, that's kind of what immersed me into that organic movement of managing honeybees, was leafcutter bees and mason bees. You all have them in your backyard, you just don't know what they are. I'm hoping that we can fix that. So, how many people, I can't tell you how many people I talk to, and we start talking about bees, and they all say the same thing. Oh, I heard the bees are in trouble. How many have heard that? Yeah, everybody. All right? So you've probably heard that in a conversation, or a bumper sticker on TV, or whatever. Save the bees. Well, what bees need saving? How many species of bees are there? 22,000 species of bees worldwide? Oh, what bees need saving? It's not the honeybee. Honeybees don't need saving. Honeybees are not in any danger of extinction. Currently, there are around 100 million hives globally. They still have their problems, environmental challenges, and pesticides, diseases, and viruses, but it's our native bees and our pollinators that are truly in trouble. The number one cause? Loss of habitat. Same old story. And we see that here like no other place. There used to be a vacant lot. You drive by near your home. It's now a condo. Right? The loss of habitat is real. So we got pesticides, monocropping, climate change, and honeybees face the same problems of environmental challenges. But the big difference is it's extremely difficult to manage native bees and other pollinators. They're mostly solitary. They can't be moved around like a beehive. They're left to survive on their own and deal with the challenges recreated in their environment. Here in the Northeast, approximately 25% of native bees are specialists, meaning they collect pollen from just one species or plant. to feed their young. These specialists are more sensitive to habitat loss and declining in greater numbers. What you can do is plant common native plants like goldenrod, sunflowers, asters, black-eyed Susans. These are just some of the plants that you can plant to help. And the pollinator pathway, by the way, I haven't mentioned it, is a fantastic resource. I've used that so many times. If you go on their website, it's just anything you can think of. How to build up native bee habitat, what native plants to plant. Fantastic resource. How to organically get rid of mosquitoes and ticks in your yard. It's fantastic. So a little bit about honeybee biology, just to give you a little understanding of a honeybee. There are three types of hives within, three types of bees within the colony, within the hive. A typical hive can average around 40,000 bees. In the hives, we have the workers, all female, the drones, all male, and the queen. She is the heart and soul of the colony. Without her, the colony would collapse. Her sole purpose is to lay eggs. Anybody guess how many eggs a queen can lay per day? Any guesses? A little less than that, but 1,500 to 2,000 eggs a day is what a typical good queen can lay. So her sole purpose is to lay eggs, 1,500 to 2,000 eggs a day, send out pheromones, which are chemical signals. That's how bees communicate. They don't have ears. They communicate through chemical signals. So she sends out pheromones that keep the colony in order. The entire hive are her sons and daughters for the most part. So all those bees in there are all her sons and daughters. Can you imagine opening 40,000 tiny Mother Day card? Happy Mother Day, Ma! Thank you. So the entire hives are her sons and daughters for the most part. The workers do all the work, the females, just like they do in real life. They're building comb, caring for the baby bees, guarding the hive, and collecting pollen and nectar. The drones, the male bees, really do nothing around the hive. Their sole purpose is to mate with a virgin queen. They hang around the hive, they beg for food. They're like teenage boys who don't clean up after themselves and think of only food and girls. So honeybees are extremely intelligent, given they have the brain the size of a sesame seed. They can see in color, in UV light, except for red. I think butterflies can see red, right, George?
Red to purple. Yeah.
Red to purple? In UV, like UV in the spectrum, right? So honeybees can see every color except for red. Red looks black to them. Some fun facts about honeybees. Honeybees have 5 eyes. They have 2 on either side of the head, 3 on the top of the head. The 3 small eyes on the top of the head they use for navigation. They read the polarization light of the sun is how they navigate. They have 170 odor receptors. They have a smell 50 times greater than that of a dog. Imagine if you went to the airport and they had honeybees to sniff you instead of dogs. That'd be something. And I can tell you, that's absolutely true. They can smell. When I'm harvesting honey, man, I just got to be quick about it because they just follow me wherever I go, man. They're buzzing around the window. Yeah, give me my honey back, you know. Only the female honeybee can sting. And that is true. Correct me if I'm wrong. All species of bees, only the female stings. The males do not sting. Just like in real life, women have stingers and men don't. So, did you pass that hexagon right there? That frame, that's a honey super. Pick that up, show it everybody. Okay? That right there, that hexagonal shape of the honeycomb is the most efficient shape in the world. That's the most efficient shape in the world. Nothing else. And honeybees know how to make that. Not only that, but if you hold that up, you have it upside down.
Oh, I do?
Yeah. So turn it around the other, tabs at the top. So that's the way it goes in the hive. All right? So not only that is that the most efficient shape in the world, but it's also, you can't see it, but they build those cells, those combs at a 1 to 2 degree angle facing down. So the nectar doesn't drip out. Isn't that amazing how they know how to do that? I never get tired of that. It's just totally amazing. So 1 pound of honey is made from 2 million flower visits. Imagine that. So I've been selling a ton of honey. A pound. It take the bee 2 million flower visits to make a pound of honey. That's crazy. Worker bees can live on an average of 35 days in the summer. And winter bees can live 4 to 6 months. I don't have time to explain all that. But there's a difference between summer and winter bees. They're the same bees. But I'm here to tell you, when you see that bee on a flower in your garden, in your yard, have a little empathy for that female worker bee, because she's at the end of her lifespan. 35 days as an average. All right, so she's out risking her life, gathering pollen and nectar. Okay, and right about now, bees are preparing for winter. This is a very important time in beekeeping right now. Is we have to keep our varroa mite, invasive species of varroa, destructor mite, small hive beetles under control. They decimate hives across the United States. So we have to keep those under control. Make sure they have enough honey. Make sure you don't take enough honey. Make sure you have a good laying queen going into the winter. What's happening now is this new generation of bees that are being born have more fat bodies. They're designed to live throughout the winter, 4 to 6 months, because they're their own heaters. So in a few months, they're not going to be out foraging. So they can conserve energy that way. They're not out there beating themselves up every day, risking their lives from flower to flower, getting hit by a windshield, getting eaten by, a bird or a dragonfly. So I think that's interesting, just so you know, that around 35 days. The drones, the male bees, they don't do any foraging. You're not going to see those, and you're not going to see a queen. But so around 35 days is the average for, yes. The queen can live like an average around 3 years. Yeah. So here's another thing. Honeybee venom is more powerful than that of a cobra. But it would take more than 3,800 stings to kill an average man. Honeybees are the only insect that man consumes food from. If you enjoy being outside, if you enjoy working in your garden, tending your flowers, pay more attention to your environment. Learn what pollinators you have in your gardens. It can add depth and satisfaction and for you and a better understanding of them. If your cucumbers are curling on the end, you don't have enough pollinators in your yard. It simply means they're not fully pollinated. So I encourage you, if you're, cucumbers are like, meh, you need to have more pollinators in your yard. So I'm just about done here. So some key points to this little quick presentation is that pollinators contribute billions of dollars to our economy. Pay attention to your environment, not just yours. Be active in your community. Support local gardeners, farmers, beekeepers, shop farmers markets. You're supporting people who care about the environment and showing that you care as well. Educate yourself. Learn about our native pollinators. Build your own habitats. Plant more bee flowers. Educating yourself will add enrichment and depth to your gardening experience. So I just want to touch on that real quick. It's easy to say build your own habitats. Well, I don't know how to do it. Pollinator Pathway has a great site. Learn how to make native bee habitats. And there's also another one, Crown Bees. That's where like I said, those were my gateway bees, were mason bees and leafcutter bees. So Crown Bees are out of Washington State. You can get all your supplies there. They sell bees online. You can get a whole big package of bees, and it's a great thing for kids, grandchildren. You don't have to have honeybees. They're easy to take care of. You don't have to do anything. You just put a little box with a bunch of holes in it, about 5 feet in the air, facing southeast, and hang it there, and they do the rest. They don't make honey. They're social, non-aggressive bees, great for kids, to teach kids about bees. So at the same token, let's get our children, our grandchildren involved with nature. After all, they are our next generation of gardeners, beekeepers, and scientists. And they will be the guardians of their generation of pollinators. Plants, bees, and butterflies have evolved over thousands of years in a symbiotic relationship. We all share the bounties that Mother Earth provides. Our pollinators give back to us the foods we enjoy, the money we put in our pockets, the flowers we love. And I rewrote this after looking around today and seeing all the kids and the smiling faces. Most importantly, thing I noticed here today is the look of wonderment and amazement in a child's eyes as they watch a bee and a butterfly dance from flower to flower. Thank you all. Was that good or what? All right, any questions? Yeah.
How are you able to control the mites?
The virulirites are a big, big problem. They came into this country an invasive species, I believe in the late 80s, early 90s from Asia. And since then, they have spread to every continent in the world. And they decimate honeybees. They feed only on the fat bodies of honeybees. So science is still working on it right now. That's why it's important to support science, students, colleges for research. They're working on called VHS queens, like a mite-resistant queen. Other than that, we have to use chemicals. There's several hard chemicals and soft chemicals. I personally do different things. I use IPM, Integrated Pest Management, by breaking the queen's brood cycle, by caging her for a week. She can't lay eggs. She can only lay a little bit of eggs. That way, the virulimites don't get out of control because they lay their eggs inside the cells. Okay, and then we use powdered sugar, shake. There's all kinds of chemicals. I use organic Hop Guard 3, which is a natural derivative from the hop plants. Oxalic acid vaporization, which I use a lot, it sounds weird, but it's wood bleach. Like if you bleach your deck, there's a special little tool and you put it on, you hook it up to a battery and it vaporizes it and you jam it underneath the hive. It does not hurt the bees whatsoever, but it kills the mites. It's difficult. You have to keep them under control, or your bees will be gone.
Now, what about, is that connected to bee Alzheimer's? They were thinking that bees were taken off and not remembering their way home.
That was part of that whole thing that had to do with this. I know what you're talking about, that save the bees. That was part of that. That whole phenomenon is what they've come to is called, oh geez, I forgot already. But it's a combination of a whole bunch of different things, of chemicals, a combination of small hive beetles, viruses, all that CCD, I think they call it, colony collapse disorder. Is that what you're talking about? They can't really put their finger on it, but it's a combination of all the things that I talked about is what's happening with colony collapse disorder.
All right, so this is awesome. And I'm following Gary, and I'm now following Mark. Gary, I was trying to listen to a lot about pollinator pathways. A lot of great information. And we're going to probably hook up with Gary and his group because a lot of stuff that he talked about, we definitely believe in. And because of course, our whole exhibit is based on butterflies, we believe that, what's going on in our ecosystem is not good. And I was just talking to a few folks over there, and absolutely, we feel the scourge of yard spraying is devastating the insect populations, including our poor butterflies. So, kind of the way we feel. Not that we want anybody to get bit by a tick or a mosquito that might be carrying a disease. We understand. But for the small amount of prevention that the yard sprayings do, the collateral damage is huge. So, okay, I know. All right, so I can't follow those guys as far as anything beyond what I'm going to talk about today. We're going to talk about monarch butterflies, because that's why we came here, right? Yay! So at our facility, we get a lot of folks coming and going. We get 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people a year that come through our facility, and we get a lot of the repetitive questions every year. Even though we provide information on sheets and things that people can read, we still get the same questions. So, so one of them being is the life cycle. I mean, butterfly life cycle. Now, we had a lot of folks today tell us that they raised up monarch butterflies, so we would figure they pretty much understand the life cycle. But for the most part, it starts with a really itty bitty egg. Okay, so I have my little chart here. Again, I don't have my easel. So as you can see in this part right here, it shows the egg. Now the egg itself is about the size of the head of a pin. So when the female butterfly comes into your yard and she finds some milkweed, she lands on that milkweed and she basically will start to lay some eggs on it. All right. So our eggs now, once they're on the milkweed, they go about 3 days. About the 4th day, a little caterpillar hatches out. And when I say little, it came out of a little egg the size of a pinhead, so you know it's pretty small, right? So once the caterpillar hatches, then they go through a growth stages. So what they call this is molt and instar. So these are the fancy words they use for it. So butterflies are in the invertebrate family. And so they go through this cycle of metamorphosis. I'm sure everybody's maybe heard that word. Okay. Metamorphosis really stands for when any type of creature goes from a juvenile stage to an adult stage. So in the case of our caterpillar friends, they're going to eat the milkweed that the female laid her eggs on. And they're going to get to a point that their skin is too tight. So the skin of a caterpillar is called the exoskeleton, and at some point they have to shed it. So they're going to shed that skin, they're going to pull their little body out from the old skin, and then they're going to have a new skin. And they're going to eat the old skin, because they don't like to waste anything. Wow. And so now they're going to continue eating, and they're going to do this about 4 times. So from the original little caterpillar that was big as the head of a pin, they're going to grow approximately about 3,000 times bigger. So now when they reach the stage that the final caterpillar stage, they're going to molt one more time. But when they molt this time, they're going to create a chrysalis. Not a cocoon, a chrysalis. So you can see the stage here where the caterpillar hangs in a J position. And then as soon as they get to that, within about a day's time, the skin breaks open on the back of the caterpillar and the green chrysalis emerges. And then you can see farther on, the skin is pushed up to the old exoskeleton, now pushed up to the top. And then the chrysalis forms. And you can see at this stage here, it's still not really looking like what we're familiar with. Now, an interesting thing about this stage is that this area right here, the top of the chrysalis, this is called the cremasta, okay? So when this stage to this stage happens, they have to hook this thing on the silk that's at the top of the leaf where they were forming. This is crucial. If they don't hook this thing, the chrysalis will fall. And of course it spells doom for them. And then after the chrysalis has then taken shape and it's kind of, become rigid, this is what we're familiar with at this stage of the game. So now we have looked at the first stages and second stages of the metamorphosis cycle. So this is the egg stage. This is the larval stage, and now we have hit the pupal stage. So this is called a pupa. Chrysalis is a pupa. And now, at that point in time, we're going to have to wait about another 10 to 14 days, sometimes sooner, and then all of a sudden that chrysalis is going to turn clear. And we're going to be able to see the wings of the monarch butterfly inside it. And then within about another 24-hour period, that butterfly is going to emerge from that chrysalis. And at that point, the butterfly pushes out of the chrysalis, it hangs off of it, and it has to get those wings out and unfurl the wings. And inside its abdominal area, it contains emergence fluid. Well, that fluid is crucial also because it has to fill the wings with fluid. And once the wings are fully formed, then they will start to stiffen. And once they are stiff enough, the butterfly now can take flight. So that is basically how the monarch is formed. Okay? All right, so at any point in that whole cycle, if something interrupts it, we don't have a monarch butterfly. Another insect, generally a predatory insect. Could be a, yes?
Quick question. How common is it for the chrysalis not to attach legs?
It doesn't happen very often, but when we have observed at that point, when the so the caterpillar hangs in the J position. We were going to do a little caterpillar anatomy here today too. So the back of the caterpillar, it has two basically claspers, so it could clasp things. Okay, so what it does is it makes a little silken button up on the top of under the leaf, and then it clasps it and hangs. But at the point that the chrysalis is now being formed, the skin is being pushed up, the cremaster has to now hook that silken button. And the top of the cremaster is like Velcro. It has a million little teeny hooks on it. So at that point in time, it's got to hook that button, and if it doesn't, down goes the chrysalis, and of course that's it for the poor little butterfly. Okay? Does that answer? Yep, okay. All right. So anyway, I had my assistant draw me a butterfly for this talk. Unfortunately, she drew it just too big. But we're going to work with it anyway, all right? Because there it is. All right. Pretty good, huh? Yeah. So anyway, this is our butterfly, our monarch. We'll call him Marty. How's that? I like Marty. Marty the monarch. All right, so our beautiful butterfly is a true insect. So being a true insect, it has 6 legs. Okay? One of the aspects of being a true insect, but we're going to go with that one right now. So it has the rear legs or hind legs, it has mid legs, and it has the forelegs. Now, the butterfly is in a group of butterflies known as brushfoots. All right? And the reason they're called brushfoots is because the front leg doesn't have the same type of a foot that the other two do. And the front, it contains kind of a brush-like appendage. And if you look at a monarch when it's standing on a leaf or a flower, you're only going to see that using the hind legs and the mid legs. Doesn't use the forelegs. So the brushfoot itself is seldom used by the insect. Females will use the brushfoot, and they do a thing called drumming. They'll drum on a leaf with the 2 forelegs. We believe that that is a way of her indicating somehow through her senses is it milkweed A, number one, and is there too many caterpillars or eggs already on the plant? So she kind of knows this and will go to another plant if she feels that it's already saturated. Okay? Now, the 2 other legs, the feet on the bottom of them are called tarsi. Just a weird name, but tarsi. And the tarsi basically are used not just as a foot, but they also have a sense of taste. So when the butterfly lands on a plant, they can actually taste with those feet. So in a way, they're sharp, so they'll make a little incision into the leaf. Juices of the leaf come up, butterfly tastes it. Now it realizes what type of plant it is. So if it's looking for its host plant, aka milkweed, it now can tell that it's milkweed. So the only thing is, and this is what I try to explain to people all the time, is that butterflies generally taste with their feet. So if they land on something toxic, guess what? They're going to absorb the toxicity through the taste receptors in their feet. So that's why we try to discourage people from handling our butterflies in our exhibit, because a lot of times we have lotion, we have perfume, and worst of all, we have, insect repellent. Yes, so all of those things can now toxify the butterfly, and usually that means it's doom. All right, so let's continue. So, okay, so now we're going to talk about the mouth appendage. It's called a proboscis. So the proboscis itself is like a tube-like mouth part. It does have a taste receptor on the bottom of the proboscis. The butterfly uses this to draw in nectar or sources of nourishment, generally in liquid form. Okay? Now, funny thing is, when that butterfly comes out of its chrysalis, the proboscis is in two halves. So not only did they have to get that cremaster up there properly, right? But it also has to now, it has to seal the proboscis together. If that doesn't happen, it can't eat. So it's another stage that's kind of important. So now we're going to go up to its eye. So like a lot of insects, the butterfly has a compound eye. So the compound eye doesn't see in incandescent light like our eye does. It sees in spectral light. A lot of things that Mark was talking about with his bees. So it sees in UV. So UV spectrum is how the butterfly really sees the world. Nothing like what we see it. So the colors it interprets and in different type of things are completely different than what we see. But that's how it finds plants, that's how it finds flowers, that's how it finds its mate, through UV light. Now it also has a little teeny eye, similar to what, again, Mark was talking about. It's called a simple eye. So the ocellus, or simple eye, is there and mainly for light to dark recognition. It can tell whether it's dark or light. The butterfly itself only is active during the day, which means its only activity is during diurnal, or we know nocturnal, right? Everybody knows nocturnal, that's dark. During the day it's diurnal, which is during the light. So the butterfly is active during the day, and that little eye tells it, so it can sense it. And that's why when it gets dark, it goes and roosts someplace and waits for the next day. Okay? Now, the antennae. Pretty important part of a butterfly. So the antennae have a sense of smell. So it is able to smell with its antennae. But it also uses them for navigation. And it also uses it for the migration. So the antennae become a very important part of the butterfly when it's flying from up here in the north all the way down to southern Mexico. It helps it to interpret light, and it helps it to keep its navigation so it will find its overwintering areas. So the wing structure, you got forewing, you have a hind wing. In this case here, we're going to just say that this is a girl. And the reason being is it doesn't have the pheromone spot. So all males have a pheromone spot on each side of its hind wings. Kind of uses that as a lure for the girls. Oops, sorry. Yep. So it uses that for a lure for the girls. Even though, as I tell everybody, butterfly loves a little rough.
No peeking.
No. All right, so that's pretty much the anatomy of our friend. Butterflies. Okay, they breathe through the sides of their body. Okay, so they don't use their mouth to breathe like we do. They actually have little holes in the side of, on the abdomen area, and that is called a sphericle. And the sphericle is very common amongst insects. Bees have them, all kinds of insects have them. So, and that's how they actually take in oxygen, as they breathe through the sides of those sphericals. So if anything plugs the sphericals, they suffocate. So All right, so I got to turn my page now. Maybe I should have had Pam hold this. I know. She did a good job, huh? I was going to attempt to draw this, but when she volunteered, I was like, okay. All right, so this is our migration. Everybody asks us about the migration of the butterflies. So the monarch butterfly basically is originated in the Americas. For the most part, scientists believe that that is where the butterfly first originated. You can find monarchs now in other parts of the world. They're in Hawaii, they're in Indonesia areas, but they feel that they were they got there by some way, or it wasn't a natural location for them. And of course, don't forget, they got to have milkweed. So if they end up in another place of the world and there's no milkweed, they're not going to be able to continue, right? So, right. So there's a place down in Mexico, and it's called the Michoacan Valley, and the fir forests down there are called the Oyamel fir forests, and that is predominantly the area that the monarch is heading to in the fall to go and overwinter. All right? So my little arrows are depicting, green arrows are going to depict the northern advance of the monarchs in the spring. Red arrows show how they get there in the fall. All right? So the monarch, being a true migratory insect, it basically now comes out through all the cycles. In early September, the emergence of the monarch butterflies, they do not mate. So the ones that are going to travel this 3,000-mile trek are not in mating mode. Their hormone has been suppressed for mating. So now they've got about 2 months of flying down through our country and into Mexico to reach their overwintering grounds. And once they get there, they will pile up in the fir trees in the thousands and just basically wait out the winter. So in the spring, around the end of February, early March, the mating kicks in. They start to mate. And once they start to mate, then they will start, with the green arrows, they'll start to move back up into North America, and Mexico. Females will mate with the males. They'll start laying their eggs on milkweed. And we don't usually see them come back to our area. So basically, based on the taggings that they do, we don't get the butterflies back up into New England. So normally what we'll do is get their second generation. So the next generation or third generation, depending on how many generations they have while they're moving up through the country. But milkweed's the key. I mean, without milkweed, they don't propagate. They can't proliferate. They have to have milkweed. So it's very important. It's very important. So once the butterflies basically come up, now the dotted line through Canada, that's about the milkweed's limit in North America. That's about as high into Canada that you can find milkweed. So that's about as high as the monarch butterfly will end up before the migration starts all over again. Okay? All right. Does anybody have questions about the migration?
Do garden centers sell milkweed?
Garden centers do sell milkweed. We err on the cautious. Sometimes they are pesticided for whatever reason. We can't figure out why. Home Depot went through this about 5 or 6 years ago. They were selling milkweed like crazy, and every bit of it had been systemically pesticided, which didn't make any sense at all, right? No. But milkweed you can find milkweed at a lot of garden centers. Or you can come visit us next spring. We'll have milkweed. Common is the most common of the milkweed that you can basically grow in your yard. Syriaca or common is found pretty much, all over the United States and stuff. So, But there's many other variations. So there's like 147 different types of milkweed around the globe. So there is milkweed in other countries. In our area, we have about 46 variations of milkweed. So I heard some of the folks coming up talking to me about Florida and stuff. They have a type of milkweed they call giant milkweed. But anyway, the whole thing is that the butterfly needs milkweed. And if it's not there, that it's going to go look somewhere else. Now, a lot of folks have told me that they have milkweed, but they haven't seen any monarchs. Well, yeah, I can't say why. I mean, in my heart, do I feel like backyard spraying has decimated the monarch and every other insect? Yes, I do. It's unfortunate, but again, we spend billions of dollars every year to kill insects. We spend almost nothing to preserve them. So, you know, what can we do? It's us. It's us. We're going to point the finger at us. Yeah. It's us. But anyway, I don't want to sound all doom and gloom. I mean, you know, they do counts every year. I mean, the girls asked me about tagging the monarchs, but the monarchs we're going to release today really wouldn't be worth tagging because they're not going to be the migration. They tag them so that they can basically find them down in the overwintering grounds, and they can get an idea of where they come from and those type of things. Now, butterflies are really, it's kind of cool, the migration type of thing. So when the butterfly gets ready to migrate, where it emerges from, it has to pick up the sun and the magnetic fields and everything else that it uses for navigation to find its way down to Mexico. Now, scientists have done experiments. So this group of scientists took several monarchs from, I think, the Missouri area, and they basically carted them over to the Carolinas. And they released them from the Carolinas and said, okay, let's see what happens, right? Well, kind of interesting. They flew back to Missouri. And then they went south. So, yeah. So that means that it is instinctive in this generation. They kind of know what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to get there. So by taking and relocating them, they had to find their original area where they had merged, and then they headed south to Mexico. So kind of cool, you know? Yeah, kind of cool, you know? So anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you guys about. I wanted to just kind of give you a little brief lesson on our friends and...
I have a question back here.
Yes. Question.
In Mexico, they use it for fertilization and reproduction.
So milkweed grows in Mexico. There's different variations as you go south, and believe me, monarchs can be found all the way into South America. But different migrational paths, different ways that they move about. There's some areas where the monarch doesn't go anywhere. So tip of Florida, kind of into Mexico. There's areas where it doesn't get cold. So what's the whole purpose of the migration? Well, it gets cold, and the monarchs can't survive cold weather. So basically, they migrate to a wintering ground, and then like a lot of animals, geese, all kinds of critters all over the world do migrations. Africa, but the whole thing is that the milkweed is the key because for them, they have to lay their eggs on it. Now, during the migration, milkweed does not become a factor because the females, again, they're not gravid, they're not going to lay eggs, so they're not looking for milkweed. But what do they need? They need food. They need to feed off of nectaring plants. So again, very important in the fall to have nectaring flowers in your yard so that they can maybe stop and tank up before they, continue on their journey. Right, exactly.
Why is milkweed so important for them here?
Because they have several generations in our area, and they need to have the milkweed for the caterpillars to make full cycle. Right, so it is the caterpillar's food. Once the female lays her eggs on it, the caterpillar hatches. That's what it eats. It eats milkweed. And in order for the caterpillar, as I showed you, to go through that full cycle and reach the chrysalis stage, it has to have milkweed.
Okay, that makes it. I have milkweed and it's pollinated.
Yep.
And I have flowers around my yard.
Yep.
But very rarely do I see a monarch in the milkweed. They're on the like the cone flowers, anything purple. That's where they go.
Right. So, like a lot of insects and birds and stuff, if you do get a monarch to your yard, so male to female, males of course have to mate with the females, and it's a long process. It's about a 24-hour mating ritual. So I'll just give you an example. So in our yard in Onset, we had a male and a female show up about a month ago, and the male and female were in our yard all the way up to about a few days ago. We haven't seen them now, and they've probably reached the end of their cycle. But for 3.5 weeks, she was out there every day laying eggs. And he was flying around nectaring, and most likely he was mating with her, which we saw that because he was carrying her across the yard. So, so that's what you're hoping for. You're hoping for that. You're hoping that a male and female will find your yard. Yeah, and you know, it's kind of funny too. They are territorial. The male, he doesn't like any other male butterflies for monarchs coming in his yard. That's his territory. Just like, hummingbirds will joust and fight, male. And actually our hummingbird and our male butterfly was fighting. We didn't get that one at all, but yeah, he wasn't nice to the hummingbird. That was strange. But territorial, right. But that is the whole thing is that, creating an ecosystem in your backyard it takes a lot of work. And you have to plant a lot of plants that the butterflies can use. So when they come in your yard, they've got to find nectar. And certain plants have a lot of nectar. Certain plants do not. And nobody has any guns here, right? Okay. Butterfly bush doesn't have a lot of nectar. It's beautiful. It's got big blooms. It smells nice, right? Totally invasive from central China. And the nectar source in the blooms is minimal. So it's not as great a thing. And I always say to people, what if they named it something else? Would you covet it as much if it wasn't called a butterfly bush? I don't know.
But they go through it.
They do, because it smells nice. And they can sense the smell with their antennae. But it's not feeding them. It's like us going to McDonald's. It smells good. We love, we enjoy the food, but the nutrition value is like, right? Okay. All right, I won't mention the butterfly bush anymore. I get in trouble all the time with that one. But, native perennials, probably the best nectaring plants that you can provide. If you want to put annuals in the yard, great. Don't buy them from Home Depot and Lowe's. Okay? Just don't. Because they're all toxic. They've all been pesticided. Nobody's going to buy a plant that's been bug chewed. So the growers basically provide systemic pesticides and make sure that those plants look great. Well, they're not great. So don't buy them. Grow your own. Before I finish, I'll tell you a quick little story. So about 6-7 years ago in Onset, we had a pollinator festival, a little thing at one of the buildings there, the church. And Ann and I went there and we set up our table, and there was a bunch of tables all around. And one of the tables was the garden club. And nicest ladies you ever met in your life. Older ladies, they were just sweet. And as I was standing at the table talking to people about butterflies, I see all these people walking around with pansies wrapped in newspaper. And I was like, where'd they get those? So finally somebody said, oh, the garden club's giving them away. Oh. So, me, I had to go over and say, hey guys, what you got there? Oh, we're pansies I said, where'd you get them? Oh, Home Depot gave them to us. I said, oh, yeah, every year they donate 3 or 4, flats of pansies and flowers. And I said, oh, that's great. Don't forget, we're at a pollinator festival now. So you know me, I had to drop the bomb. I said, oh, well, I got to tell you, those are pesticided. Well, you never saw 4 little faces so sad again, me. So I went over and I put the little tag out of the flowers and I brushed it off and I turned it over. And at that time, they used to write right on it, these have been treated with neonicotinoids. So I explained to the girls the whole thing. I told them, don't stop giving out the pansies at this point in time, And she says to me, she says, well, what are we going to do? Because Home Depot always wants to help our garden club every year. So I said, that's simple. I said, next year when you go to Home Depot, you don't take their flowers. You get their plant trays, their seeds, and their starter mix, and you grow your own annuals, right? 2 years later, they had another event, and in the advertisement, it said the garden club grew all the flowers for the event. Okay? So, small, but impactful, right? Yeah. So that's what I'm saying is just, you know, creating a backyard that works, an ecosystem. Like I said, Gary had a lot of great information. And of course, he talked about the invasive plants and all the stuff that, you know, bittersweet. And believe me, we have tons of it in our yard. Chinese bittersweet. The lady next door, who's not there anymore, planted it for making wreaths. It's everywhere, right? You can't stop it. I'm sorry. But the whole thing is that you need your perennials. You need a lot of perennials, and you need them also for different times of the year. That's important because the pollinators need these nectaring plants different all day. You know, they need them spring, they need them summer, and they need them in the fall. So you got to do your homework and figure out when the bloom times are on these plants and when they're going to produce nectar, so that way they can basically help all of the pollinators during all times of year. So it's a little bit of a task. But if you really want a backyard that works with a good ecosystem, that's what you need. You know, and then one more thing I'll add to this. Why are insects so important in our yard? Well, everybody likes birds. Don't we all love our birds? We give them bird feeders. Again, McDonald's. But anyway, birds need insects. They have to eat insects. They really do. They have to. And what do they feed their hatchlings? Insects. So, a hummingbird, I don't know if you've ever seen a hummingbird nest, it's that big. But a lot of times they have at least 2, maybe 3 eggs, so they'll have 2 or 3 hatchlings, okay? Like a lot of birds do. Every bird needs 2,000 to 3,000 insects. I mean, you think about mama and dad bird spending all that time foraging for insects to feed their hatchlings. They got to find insects. So if your yard doesn't have insects, it's basically like a desert. That there's nothing there for them to find for these. So when you see these huge houses built with, you know, all these custom lawns and all these plants and stuff that don't belong here, that's a desert. That's a sterile wasteland. That's what it is. Sterile wasteland. So there's nothing there for our birds, our insects. There's nothing. There's nothing there.